5:47 on a Friday evening. Crestwood's Asheville was full to the walls. Holden Vance sat in his usual seat at the far end of the bar, the first Ewangling of the day, sweating onto a cocktail napkin, his gray t-shirt dusted with concrete powder, his work boots still marked with the clay of the Biltmore Park job site. Behind him, Russell Cade grabbed a new brown-haired waitress by the wrist and shoved her hard against the bar. "You spill another drink on one of my VIP guests, and you're done." She did not cry. She only looked down at the hand on her arm like she was memorizing the shape of it. Holden set the can down. Stood up, slow and easy. All 6 feet 3 inches of him and 10 years of the Marine Corps fell over the bar in a long shadow. "Take your hand off her, Russell." The whole restaurant went quiet. Holden stepped out from behind the stool without hurry. His body moved the way it had learned to move through narrow spaces with an M4 on its sling, even now when the only thing in his hand was a beer. Cade let go of the waitress and turned. He knew the man at the end of his bar, 3 months of Fridays. 1 Ewangling. A 15% tip in cash. In Cade's head, Holden Vance was a line item that did not require underlining: faded jeans, cement-dusted boots, a t-shirt washed too many times. Not a threat. Vance. Cade smiled, the kind of smile a manager saves for a regular he has categorized as harmless. "Sit back down. Finish your beer. Go home to your kid. This doesn't concern you." Holden answered without raising his voice. "I've drunk 23 beers at this bar in 3 months, Russell. I've never gotten into your business once. Tonight is different. I just watched you put hands on a woman in front of 9 customers." Cade's jaw worked. This was not the voice of the man he thought he knew. Behind the bar, Danny Rourke quietly dropped one hand below the counter, near the silent call button. Danny had once seen Holden lift a full keg one-handed, and he had been thinking about that keg for the last 4 seconds. Cade recalculated. He did not recalculate fast enough to save his pride, but he recalculated fast enough to save his night. He was not afraid of Holden. He was afraid of the corner booth, and of the man sitting in it. "You're off the rest of the shift," Cade snapped at the waitress. "No pay. Get in the back." Then he walked straight into the manager's office and shut the door. 3 yards away, in the corner booth, a man in a charcoal suit sipped a single malt whiskey and watched the whole exchange. His watch was a Patek Philippe. Preston Halbrook did not stand up. He did not intervene. He only smiled, as if the evening had just become worth the drive from Charlotte. When Holden went back to his stool, Halbrook lifted 2 fingers. Cade came out of the office and walked to the booth. "The construction guy," Halbrook said. "Who is he? Regular? Former military or something? Harmless? Nobody." Halbrook tipped the whiskey and looked over Cade's shoulder at Holden's back. "Nobodies are usually the biggest problem, Russell. Remember that face." The waitress came back out of the kitchen holding her own elbow, her name tag Red Lane. She crossed to the end of the bar, rubbed her wrist once, and gave Holden a small, clean nod. "Thank you." No trembling. No extra feeling. Just a thank you from a woman who had stood in front of worse than Russell Cade and had not flinched. Holden filed that away. Before he left, he slid a folded napkin under his empty can. On it he had written, in pencil, "If you need a witness, call me. Holden Vance. 828-555-0183. She slipped it into her apron without looking at him. He picked up his daughter from the neighbor, Mrs. Edna, 2 streets over. June leapt into his arms and he carried her on one forearm the way he used to carry 40-pound bags of cement. They drove the winding road up to Black Mountain. He made pasta. Read her 2 pages of a horse book. Turned off the lamp. Then he sat on the porch in the dark. He did not open another beer. 1 a day. That was the rule he had made for himself after the 3 weeks of August in 2021 that he could not remember. June needed a sober father. The way the waitress had stood when Cade shoved her would not leave him alone. That was not the posture of a girl who spilled wine. That was the posture of someone used to giving orders. In a rented apartment in West Asheville, Delaney Crestwood sat on the edge of a narrow bed with a burner phone pressed to her ear. "I have a witness who isn't staff," she told Theo Prynne. "Former military, I think." The way he moved. He has no idea who I am. That is exactly what I need. She did not yet know that Preston Halbrook had been in the booth. She did not yet know he had asked Cade for the construction worker's name. Saturday morning broke clear and cold over Asheville. Holden walked June into Pack Square downtown, holding her mittened hand while she skipped over the cracks in the sidewalk. They stopped at the coffee cart by the fountain. Ahead of them in the short line stood a woman in a gray wool sweater and jeans, her hair loose down her back. "That's the waitress from last night," June said, too loud. Lane turned. For half a second, her shoulders locked. Then her face opened, and for the first time since Holden had met her, she smiled like she meant it. They sat together on a wrought iron bench with 3 paper cups warming their hands. Lane asked what he did for a living. "Build," Holden said. "Biltmore Park, mostly. Before that, Marine Corps." She nodded as if confirming an equation she had already solved. "I moved to Asheville about 2 months ago," she said. "I'm trying to learn the restaurant business from the inside out." Half true. Half not. Holden did not push. June finished her hot chocolate and ran off to chase the pigeons that had learned to live on tourists. She came skidding back a minute later, mitten full of crumbs, and shouted the sentence that changed the morning. "Daddy, is the building on Grandma's postcard your building?" Holden went still in the middle of lifting his cup. Lane's eyes slid to the postcard sticking out of June's pocket. The image was one she had seen 100 times in a graduate seminar on urban preservation, Beacon Hill Heritage Tower, Boston. 34 stories of restored brick and new glass, held together by an engineering solution that had made the cover of Architectural Record in 2018. Lead architect, H. Vance. "Grandma said you drew it before I was born," June went on, oblivious, "but Daddy doesn't like talking about it." Lane looked at Holden with new eyes. A construction worker with cement on his boots and a single beer rule, who used to stand for hours in front of a drafting table and figure out how to save a building that everyone else wanted to tear down. Holden saw her see him. He did not deny it. "That was another life," he said. "Caroline was alive. June wasn't born yet. I was a different man." Lane did not push. She set her cup down on the bench between them and said, quietly, "You don't have to be a different man. You only have to be the one who stood up last night." He looked at her for a long time. When they walked their separate directions at the edge of the square, Lane cut through an alley to the parking deck and sat in her rental sedan for 10 minutes before she drove. Back in her rented apartment, she opened her laptop and typed 3 words into the search bar. Vance and Merrow Architects. Withdrawal. 2021. The first result was a short industry obituary for a firm that had lost one of its founding partners. Co-founder Holden Vance stepped down following personal loss. She scrolled. A second link, from a Marine Corps reunion newsletter, filled in the rest. Former USMC Sergeant. Bronze Star, Helmand Province. 2012. She closed the laptop and stared at the wall. A man who had stood under Taliban fire, who had designed a 34-story tower, who had chosen to carry cement because carrying cement let him sleep at night, and who had still stood up for a stranger in a restaurant he did not own. This was the kind of witness she had been praying for. It was also the kind of man she had never met. That night, Holden sat on the edge of June's bed and watched her sleep. On the table beside her was her sketchbook, open to a new drawing. A woman stood very straight in the middle of a tilted table. Behind the woman, a large man in a gray shirt blocked out the rest of the picture with his shoulders. Holden heard Caroline's voice the way he sometimes still did, a clean line cut into the middle of his chest. "Don't stop helping people just because I'm gone." He wiped his eyes with the back of his wrist. For the first time in 2 years, he did not try to push the memory away. Monday morning, his phone would not stop vibrating. At first he thought it was the foreman calling about weather. It was not. A video had been posted overnight to 3 of the local pages, a tight 15-second clip shot from a phone at the next table. It showed only the moment when Holden's hand had locked onto Cade's forearm. It did not show Cade grabbing Lane. It did not show her asking him to let go. It did not show the booth in the corner. The caption read, "Veteran loses control, attacks businessman in Asheville restaurant." By noon, the clip had 180,000 views. By 3, Holden's site supervisor at Biltmore Construction called him into the trailer and told him, not meeting his eyes, that the company was placing him on unpaid administrative leave. Liability. By 5, the 3 weekend jobs he had lined up had gone quiet. In 48 hours, Holden Vance went from $4,800 a month to nothing. He sat at the kitchen table that night and sorted the bills by due date the way Catherine had taught him, years ago, the way he had kept doing after she was gone because it was one of the small habits that held his life in place. Rent. Electric. The ballet class June loved. He had savings enough for 2 months. After that, the numbers stopped making sense. At June's school Tuesday morning, another parent saw him in the drop-off line and pulled her daughter toward a different door. June came home with her backpack dragging on the floor. "Daddy, did you do something bad?" He got down on one knee so his eyes were level with hers and put both hands on her shoulders. "I helped a woman who was being hurt. Somebody didn't want people to know that. Do you believe me?" She nodded. But her eyes were different now, and he hated the man in the charcoal suit for that more than for anything else. In her rented apartment, Delaney was already moving. Theo Prynne called with a morning briefing, and halfway through the second sentence she understood that this was not Cade acting alone. This was a coordinated campaign. Someone with media contacts and legal reach was pushing this clip into the feeds. She called Mara Olson. Friday night. The corner booth. Reservation book. Mara checked. Preston Halbrook. Halbrook Capital Partners. Delaney sat down on the edge of the bed. She had been watching Halbrook for 8 months. His fund had bought 18% of Crestwood Hospitality through a trust in 2021. She had suspected a hostile takeover play but had never been able to prove the quiet theft beneath the books. Now he had showed his own face in her own restaurant, and he had seen a man named Holden Vance do a small decent thing, and he had decided to destroy him for it. She called Theo back. "Find me a lawyer in Asheville. Veterans practice. Good, today." Andrea Vasquez's number came back inside the hour. 41, single mother of 2, a cramped second-floor office on Haywood Road, a caseload built on coffee and spite. Delaney wired a retainer through a veterans legal aid fund without her name attached. Andrea called Holden Tuesday morning. "Mr. Vance, I'm your attorney. There's no fee. An anonymous donor through veteran legal aid is covering it. Do you want to fight this?" Holden was silent for 3 seconds. "Yes." She drove up to Black Mountain that afternoon. Spread her files on his kitchen table. Told him Halbrook had filed a civil suit for $2 million in defamation damages. Told him the first settlement offer had already landed. $50,000 and a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. Holden read the NDA for 3 seconds. Then he tore it down the middle. "Tell Halbrook to take his money home and choke on it." Andrea put the halves in her briefcase and nodded once. This was the kind of client she had gone to law school for. That night, Holden sat on his porch in the cold. The Yuengling was in the fridge. He did not reach for it. One a day, tonight was not a day he could afford even one. His daughter needed a father sober enough to answer a phone at 3 in the morning, and starting tomorrow that was the father he was going to be. Wednesday evening, Delaney drove up the mountain without calling. She carried a covered baking dish in both hands and stood on the porch for a full minute before she knocked. "I have never made lasagna," she said when Holden opened the door. "I watched a video on my phone in the grocery store parking lot. This may be terrible." He stepped aside and let her into the house. He had not let anyone into this house since Caroline had died. Delaney stood in the small kitchen and took in, without staring, the things that had kept him upright. A photograph of Caroline on the mantel in the next room. A pine box on the bookshelf holding a tiny pair of ballet slippers. A folded flag in a triangle case on top of the sideboard. She set the lasagna down on the counter next to a stack of bills arranged by due date and a schedule taped to the fridge with 2 of 3 jobs crossed out. Then she turned and faced him. "I owe you half a confession," she said. "I am not a normal waitress. I've been investigating something inside Crestwoods. You got pulled into this because of me. The anonymous lawyer is me." She did not say the word CEO. "Not yet." He looked at her a long time. "You helped me before you knew Halbrook would come after me." She went still. You know his name? I asked Danny. Your bartender. He told me who was in the booth. She understood then what she was dealing with. This man was not going to sit in the passenger seat of his own defense. He was already building a case. Good. She unpinned a small enamel lapel pin from the inside of her coat and set it on the kitchen table between them. It looked like a plain silver leaf. Crestwood R&D prototype, she said. We call it the Whisper. 48-hour rolling audio loop, tamper-evident timestamp, cryptographic seal. I've worn it every shift for 3 months. It has Friday night. All of it. Cade grabbing me. Me asking him 3 times. You standing up. Halbrook in the booth after you left. He stopped breathing for a second. This was a nuclear weapon on a kitchen table. And she had not used it yet, because using it meant burning her cover. June padded out of the hallway in her pajamas, hair everywhere, clutching a drawing. A woman with brown hair stood next to a large man in a gray t-shirt and, between them, a little girl. Miss Lane, are you staying for dinner? Delaney looked at the drawing. At June. Nodded. The 3 of them ate lasagna. It was not terrible. It was almost good. June asked Delaney about her job, and Delaney told her about a company I used to do market research for. Holden noticed how carefully she chose the words. He did not push. June made Delaney try to draw a horse and laughed for 5 straight minutes at the result. Delaney laughed too, the way a woman who has run a 47-restaurant company for 6 years forgets how to laugh, which is to say she laughed like a person, not a title. After June had been tucked in, Delaney and Holden sat across the kitchen table. Give me 72 hours, she said. There is a meeting I have to be in. After that, I'll tell you everything. I trust you, he said. She left at 10:30. On the winding road back down to town, she called Theo. Find me every woman who worked within 20 feet of Preston Halbrook in the last 5 years. I want names, numbers, and I want to know how many of them will talk. In the kitchen, Holden rinsed the plates one at a time. Half a pan of lasagna sat in the fridge. For the first time in 2 years, his refrigerator held food that someone else had made for him. Thursday morning, Andrea Vasquez's office smelled like burnt coffee. Holden sat across her scarred desk with his forearms on a stack of Discovery. They were 3 hours into strategy when she stopped, pen hovering. Mr. Vance. I need to ask you about something. I pulled your records last night for a background brief. Your wife, Caroline Vance. Was she the Caroline Vance who attended the oncology support group at Mission Health in 2020? He went very still. Yes. Why? Andrea set down the pen. Looked at the wood grain of the desk. My husband died in June of 2020. Pancreatic. I went to that group for 14 weeks. I sat next to your wife. She talked about you. She talked about June. She talked about the fact that you'd walked away from a firm in Boston so your daughter would grow up with a father who was home for dinner. Andrea lifted her eyes. They were red. I did not know you were Holden Vance when I took this case. I took it because the fund paid. But I know now. And I am not going to let anybody hurt the man that Caroline talked about in that room. She was proud of you. I hope you knew that. He did not answer. He put his forehead down on the edge of her desk and, for the first time since he had buried his wife, he cried in front of another human being. Andrea did not touch his shoulder. She pushed a box of tissues across the desk and waited. When he could speak again, she said, quietly, he is not just coming after you anymore. He is coming after a man Caroline Vance loved. I am not going to let that pass. Across town, in a small house in South Asheville, a long-haul truck driver named Marcus Webb sat on the couch and watched the edited 15-second clip cycle on WLOS for the 4th time that day. His 12-year-old daughter, Jada, sat cross-legged beside him with a book open on her knees. Daddy. Were you in that restaurant Friday night? He nodded. Did you see it happen? He nodded again. Jada closed the book. Daddy. If you saw it and you don't say anything, then you're the same as the guy who filmed it. He sat with that sentence for an hour. Then he picked up his phone and looked up the office of the attorney representing Holden Vance. At 4 that afternoon Andrea's office phone rang. Ma'am. My name is Marcus Webb. I was the trucker in the corner booth on Friday night. 8 years military police, U.S. Army. I know what that man Vance did and what he did not do. The waitress asked Cade to let go 3 times. Vance gave him every chance to stand down before a hand was laid on anyone. That was textbook defensive intervention. I am ready to sign a sworn statement. Andrea set the phone down and called Theo Prynne. We have a second witness. Former MP. 8 years. Theo was quiet for a beat. Now we have a case. Friday, a war room took shape in Andrea's back office. Andrea and Theo worked across a folding table, coffee going cold between them. Delaney had authorized Theo to coordinate with Andrea without yet telling Andrea who Theo worked for. The first call was to Rachel Keene, 29, a former bartender at the Grand Asheville Hotel. 3 years of silence about hands that had not asked and a series of text messages that had threatened her career in language no one should have to read. She said yes on the second call. She would go on the record. 2 other women reached out on their own through a private message thread a veteran barkeepers group had kept alive. They signed sworn declarations that afternoon. Neither was yet ready to be named publicly. Andrea now had the whisper audio, 3 women with corroborating accounts, a former MP eyewitness, and photographs of a second set of books Mara Olson had sent Delaney from Cade's office 2 weeks earlier. A pattern was coming up out of the documents like a shape rising from dark water. Halbrook escalated. He hired Meridian Intelligence Group out of Charlotte. Thursday night, photographs of June on the school playground, shot through a telephoto lens from across the street, appeared on an anonymous account. No caption. No explicit threat. The message required no caption. Holden looked at the first photo, then the second, then the third. His hands started to shake, for the first time in 10 years, with the particular rage a Marine spends 8 years of therapy learning to hold. He did not open a beer. He picked up the phone and called Lieutenant Henry Brooks, the Asheville officer he had worked with on a job site security matter in 2022. Brooks opened a criminal investigation into harassment, stalking, and witness intimidation inside 2 hours. Friday night, June brought her father a cardboard box she had pulled off the attic shelf. It had Caroline's handwriting on the top. Holden had not opened it since his mother-in-law had shipped it down from Boston 3 years ago. Inside, tucked between 2 sweaters, was a yellowed Forbes from 2015, a small column on page 84. 30 under 30. Delaney Crestwood. Heiress quietly reshaping a family restaurant group. Folded into the same page was a letter in Caroline's looping script. Unsent. It was addressed to Delaney. Delaney, I don't know you. But I have read about you. Holden and I ate dinner at the original Crestwoods in Savannah on our honeymoon in 2014. You would not remember. But thank you for refusing to sell the company off when your father went into the hospital. I believe that a woman who knows how to protect what her family built will also know how to treat other people with decency. I hope we meet one day. Caroline Vance. Holden read it twice. Sat in the kitchen for 10 minutes without moving. Then he got his keys and drove down the mountain. He knocked on Delaney's apartment door at 11 at night. When she opened it, he walked past her and laid the letter on her dining table. Read it. She read. Her hand started to shake halfway through. Caroline had known her. Before the dyed hair. Before the apron. Before she had buried herself inside a false name to find out who she was. She looked up. I know who you are, Holden said. Danny showed me an old Forbes this morning. He was cleaning out the bar storage and found the magazine in a box the previous owner had left behind. I needed to hear it from you. She told him. The real name. The company. 3 months of investigation. Preston Halbrook. All of it. She apologized for not telling him sooner. He did not reach across the table. He did not move toward her. Caroline had good instincts, he said. I'm learning to trust people again. He set the letter down between them like an exhibit, a piece of evidence that the line of this particular life had run longer than either of them had known. Tuesday, she said. Crestwood board meeting. I am going to end Halbrook. Will you come with me? He nodded. Yes. Tuesday morning, the Crestwood Hospitality Group quarterly board meeting convened at the Charlotte headquarters. 9 board members sat around a long mahogany table, Theo Prin and Andrea Vasquez flanked Delaney. Holden sat behind her shoulder and did not say a word. On a wall screen, piped in by video from his own Charlotte office, sat Preston Halbrook with his lawyer. "Before we turn to the quarterly agenda," she said, "I have a matter of board integrity to raise." Halbrook gave a thin, amused smile on the screen. He had no idea. Delaney pressed a button on the console. A clean 4-minute and 12-second audio clip filled the room. Delaney, 3 times, asking Russell Cade to let go, Cade's snarl. The scrape of a bar stool. Holden's quiet sentence, "Take your hand off her." Cade's retreat. And then, unmistakable, Preston Halbrook's voice in the booth, murmured to Cade after Holden's back was turned. "Remember that face, Russ. I want him gone from Asheville inside 2 weeks." The room froze. 3 board members turned their faces away from the wall screen. "This audio has been authenticated by 3 independent forensic analysts," Delaney said. "It is accompanied by a sworn statement from Marcus Webb, former U.S. Army Military Police eyewitness. And by statements from 3 women describing a consistent pattern of sexual misconduct by Mr. Halbrook over the past 5 years, including Miss Rachel Keene, who has agreed to be named on the record." Halbrook's face darkened on the screen. His lawyer began to speak. Delaney raised one hand without looking at him. "I am not finished. Halbrook Capital Partners orchestrated a media campaign designed to destroy a civilian witness, Holden Vance, former United States Marine Sergeant, Bronze Star recipient 2012. That campaign included an edited video, targeted pressure on Mr. Vance's employer, and surveillance photography of his 8-year-old daughter on a school playground. Lieutenant Henry Brooks of the Asheville Police Department opened a criminal investigation yesterday. The FBI referred file number is MR 2026-0147. She turned to the full board. "I move that this board vote to remove Halbrook Capital Partners from the Crestwood Hospitality Strategic Investor roster and to trigger the mandatory buyback clause embedded in the 2019 shareholder agreement, Section 11, which authorizes this company to repurchase the shares of any investor found in breach of corporate ethical standards." 8 of the 9 board members voted yes inside 4 minutes. Halbrook's 18% stake was bought back at his original purchase price. He would walk away with zero appreciation, $47 million of potential profit gone. That was not the worst thing that happened to him in that meeting. On the wall screen, behind Halbrook, the office door opened. Lieutenant Henry Brooks and 2 FBI agents walked in. Halbrook's lawyer said something the board microphone did not catch. Brooks placed Halbrook under arrest for 3 counts of sexual misconduct, witness intimidation, stalking of a minor, and conspiracy to commit defamation. The cuffs went on in front of his 2 assistants and, through the live video feed, in front of the Crestwood Hospitality Board of Directors. His face, in high definition, was the last thing anyone in the room looked at before Delaney closed the feed. At the same hour in Asheville, Russell Cade was arrested at the Crestwood's front door for wage theft and assault. Within 90 minutes, the story was on CNBC. Within 3 hours, the Wall Street Journal had a byline. The edited 15-second clip was re-examined by every outlet that had run it. Retractions went up. That evening, Delaney did not go back to Charlotte. She drove up to Black Mountain. Holden was sitting on the porch when her headlights turned into the drive. She climbed the stairs and sat down in the empty chair next to him without a word. They sat 15 minutes in the cold before she spoke. "It's done. He can't touch you or June anymore." "Thank you," he said. "You're thanking me. I'm the one who pulled you into this." He turned his head to look at her. "No. I walked into that restaurant Friday because I wanted a beer. I stood up because I wanted to. You did not pull me into anything." She was quiet. After a moment she let her head rest against his shoulder. It was the first time in 12 years she had leaned on someone. 2 weeks later the story was still running on the national cable channels, though it had moved to the middle of the hour. Biltmore Construction called Holden and invited him back. He declined, politely. 3 other firms called offering him management positions. He wrote their numbers down on an index card and put the card in a drawer. 32 employees at Crestwood's Asheville received their stolen tips, with interest, along with a compensation payment from the company. Cade pled out to 18 months of federal time and a lifetime industry bar. Halbrook refused his first plea offer. His lawyers tried every delay they knew. But the pattern was too clean, and the women too many, and court watchers on the business page began to use the word inevitable. Mara Olson opened a small bakery on Lexington Avenue with a low-interest loan from Delaney, not a gift, so Mara could keep her own signature on the door. Andrea Vasquez was named Attorney of the Year by the North Carolina Veterans Legal Association. Marcus Webb and Jada appeared on a local morning program. Marcus said, "My daughter taught me something 8 years of military police could not teach me. Silence is a form of participating." Holden and Delaney did not speak in words about what they were. Delaney drove to Black Mountain every weekend. She learned how he took his coffee. June taught her to draw a horse that looked roughly like a horse. Holden pulled out the rolled drawings of a community house he had started sketching 4 years ago, a shelter for homeless veterans in Candler that he had never shown to anyone, and unrolled them on the workshop table behind the house. One Saturday afternoon Delaney sat on the porch and watched him carry a stack of lumber around the corner. When he came back, she said, without looking at him, "My father wants to meet you. Not to approve of anything. Just to meet." He nodded. "All right." June ran up the porch steps a minute later with a new drawing in both hands. A caped figure stood between a little girl and a larger, angry figure. "Is that Daddy?" Delaney asked. June shook her head with the devastating precision of an 8-year-old. "No. It's anybody who helps. Daddy says anybody can be that person. You just have to choose." Delaney looked at the drawing for a long time. That night, back in her apartment in Asheville, she called Theo. "I am starting a new initiative. The Crestwood Workplace Safety Initiative. Harassment Prevention, Crisis Intervention Training, in Restaurant Safety Systems. Rolled out across all 47 properties and offered to any company that wants it." Theo was quiet, then said, "You are going to need a head of security and training. I know exactly who." That same night Holden stood in the small shop behind his house and unrolled the Beacon Hill Heritage Tower drawings for the first time in 4 years. He set them side by side with the community house for Candler. He picked up a mechanical pencil, the one he had bought in Boston in 2014, and began to draw again. His hand did not shake. A month later, in May, the dogwoods flowered white all over Black Mountain. Delaney drove up the mountain on a Saturday morning with a folder on the passenger seat. In the seat beside her sat Richard Crestwood, 67, her father, founder of the company, retired from operations for 7 years and not entirely used to other people's houses. In Holden's kitchen, Richard sat across the table from him. June was on the porch with Delaney, teaching her to identify the birds at the feeder. "Mr. Vance. I had someone run a background on you the afternoon of the board meeting. I owe you an apology for that. My daughter was right about you. You don't have a price." "I don't need the apology," Holden said. "I did what anyone should have done." Richard nodded once. "That's the point. Anyone should have. Only you did." He pushed the folder across the table. "This is not charity. This is a job offer. Head of Security and Intervention Training for the Crestwood Workplace Safety Initiative. $115,000 a year. Full benefits. Hours built around a single-parent schedule. You don't owe us anything. You are free to decline. But your skill set, a Marine Scout leader, a crisis responder, a man who has spent 8 years in therapy learning to manage his own weight, that is exactly what this program needs." Holden opened the folder and read in silence. Delaney, out on the porch, did not turn her head. This had to be his decision alone. "I need to think." "Of course," Richard said. After Richard left, Delaney stayed. Holden sat at the table with the folder. June climbed into his lap. "Are you going to take it, Daddy? What do you think I should do?" "I think you should do what makes you happy." She considered. "And helping people makes you happy." Holden looked at the refrigerator. The drawing of the caped figure was already there, held in place by a magnet shaped like a dinosaur. He turned toward Delaney. "I'll take it." She did not move to him. She only slid her hand across the table. He took it. One palm rough with concrete and one palm smooth from conference rooms, fitted together like timber and mortar. That night Delaney stayed. She slept on the couch under one of Caroline's old wool blankets, not in his bed. Not yet. But in his house. Close enough. Before she turned off the lamp, she walked past the mantel and paused at Caroline's photograph. She did not say anything. She did not make a speech. She only rested her fingertips against the frame for a second, the way one woman acknowledges another who has gone ahead of her into a house. Holden watched from the kitchen doorway. He did not speak. He turned off the porch light, locked the door, and went to bed in a house that for the first time in 4 years held 3 breathing people. 6 months later, in November, the first training session of the Crestwood Workplace Safety Initiative convened inside Crestwood's Asheville, at the same restaurant where it had all started. 40 managers, HR directors, security officers, and servers from 12 companies filled the tables. Andrea Vasquez gave the opening remarks. Mara Olson brought 3 dozen cinnamon rolls from her bakery. Marcus Webb came with Jada, who was 13 now and sat in the back row with a notebook and a blue pen. Holden stood at the front of the room in a dark blue button-down shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows, no jacket. "The hardest part is not the confrontation," he said. "The hardest part is the voice in your head that says, 'It's not my business, somebody else will handle it, I could get hurt.' But when a person is being hurt and you have the power to stop it, it is your business, it is everybody's business." Rachel Keene sat in the first row. She and 2 of the other women had joined the initiative as advocates. They were not victims in this room. They were teachers. Delaney stood against the back wall. She did not speak. This was Holden's day. When the session ended, most of the crowd drifted out into the early dark. Holden, Delaney, and June stayed behind at the bar. 3 stools at the far end, his usual stool in the middle. Danny Rourke set down 3 drinks without asking. A Yuengling for Holden. A glass of red wine for Delaney, a cream soda with a curly straw for June. Delaney turned toward Holden. "Do you remember that night? Every day." She tilted her head toward the spot where she had been standing when Cade shoved her. "If you hadn't been sitting here." Holden sipped his beer. "You would have handled it. You are Delaney Crestwood." She shook her head. "I would have handled it. But I would not have known. I would not have known that a stranger can stand up for a stranger. I would have run 47 restaurants and not known that. You did not only get me out of Cade's hand. You got me out of becoming a woman who no longer believed that was possible." June climbed up between them on the middle stool and raised her cream soda. "Cheers." 3 glasses touched. Outside the front window, a small brass plate had been mounted next to the main sign. It read, "This establishment does not tolerate harassment of any kind. We protect each other here." 800 miles north, Beacon Hill Heritage Tower still stood in the last light of a Boston afternoon. Somewhere a tourist took a picture of it. The tourist did not know who had drawn it or where he was now. The man who had drawn it was sitting at the end of the bar at Crestwood's Asheville with a cold beer in his hand, his daughter on the stool beside him, and beside her a woman who had once hidden her name inside a waitress's apron and who now had a name he used when the sun went down. Holden Vance had never wanted to be a hero. He had only refused to be a bystander. And in a world full of people looking away, that made all the difference.